And we're live. Welcome, Lisa Benson, to the
Hi,
studio.
Mike. How are you?
That's a very big glass of beer you've got there.
I
Eh?
know, it's a tea. It's a cup of tea. It's a huge one.
It's a ginormous
Yeah,
one.
it is a ginormous one.
And you're up there, where are you up there in Lake
I'm in
Macquarie?
Newcastle on Lake Macquarie. That's correct. Yes, I spend
Sounds
half of
very-
my time, half of my time here in Newcastle, and then half of my time in Sydney. So running between two houses. So that's exciting.
When we chatted earlier, you said, I didn't catch all of the story, but maybe you can elaborate a bit more. But you didn't come from a boating family, but you lived on Sydney Harbour on a boat for like 5 years.
I certainly did. Yes, I wasn't. My dad was a fisherman, but that was the only boating experience that I had. But my husband's actually a sailor, and a serious sailor who's been in Sydney to Hobart's and sails every week, basically. And because we are in Sydney for his work, at least 3 or 4 days a week, sometimes 2 days, it changes every week. We thought, what a good opportunity to have a boat on Sydney Harbour, and that can be our home for a few days a week. So we did that for 5 years, and it was a wonderful experience. So we were able to go out and do the New Year's Eve fireworks and go for little holidays. And so, it was quite a unique experience for us. So spending time between two houses is exciting, but it does require a lot of organisation as well. But we try and make the most of it.
What boat were you on? What sort of boat?
The one in Sydney was a catamaran, and so it was a 53-foot motor cat. So it was quite roomy, and we definitely had enough room, and we could even have people stay over. And so it was quite comfortable and very private for my writing. So I was able to be out on the water and go with the rocks because it was on the Parramatta River. So we had the ferries going past quite regularly. So it was nice and peaceful, and no people knocking on the door or no visitors. So it was very very secluded, and as I said, a very unique way to live for a little while. It was a lot of fun, and we've got lots of memories from that time.
So nobody coming to sell you real estate or their own religion?
That's exactly right. No one knocking on the door.
Sure. Yeah. So but you are a Sydney girl, aren't you?
No, I actually grew up, it's a little bit confusing, but I grew up on the central coast of New South Wales, so in between. And I went to uni in Newcastle, so a long time ago now. But I went to Newcastle Uni in the 90s, and just coincidentally, when I met my husband, and again, it's a bit random, we met in Queensland. It was just a coincidence that he was from Newcastle, so I moved eventually from the Central Coast to Newcastle, and then since then we've done this life where we're in both places. So rather exciting, like I said.
So it was just were you an only child, or do you have siblings?
No, I have one sister, so she's just turned 50. She's about 20 months older than me. So so she's my only sibling.
You're the kid sister.
I'm the baby. Yes.
So, all right. So what did you study at uni when you went there?
What did a bachelor of... Sorry, what was that?
A book about, where have I been all my life? So
That's exactly right.
We're going to head up towards that, but
we'll eventually get there. Yes.
Eventually get there. But so where did you? So we're on the Central Coast. I kind of know it, but can you be a little bit more specific? Because it's like 100 kilometers.
That's exactly right. There was lots of places that I lived. Grew up with the family as a teenager in Narara, so I'm not sure whether you know that area. And I was in Terrigal for a while. So, and when I met Mark, I was living at Erina. So all those different places. So it's lovely. So I had a year there. It was very nice. So but then I was in.
What did you study at uni? What did you want to do?
I did a Bachelor of Business, but it was quite aimless, actually. And I talk about this in my book. I just didn't know what I wanted to do, so I did a business degree. Obviously it's broad. So I majored in tourism and marketing and ended up working in Sydney. So I did a big commute in my 20s. I was on the Central Coast traveling to Sydney by train. So it was a 4-hour a day commute. And I was working for hotels and resorts. So I worked for the Menzies Hotel in Sydney, and I worked for Cypress Lakes Resort in the Hunter Valley, but for their Sydney sales office. I was basically organised conferences for the corporate market in Sydney. So yeah, so 4 hours a day. After 7 years of doing that, I thought it was time for a change. So
just go back. So why did you do this degree in the first? Why did you do this particular degree in the first place? Why not yachting?
So exactly. Well, why not? Well, because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and a lot in my book talks about expectations, and I was the smart one supposedly, and the first one in the family to go to uni. So there was this expectation that I was going to, do something or be a businesswoman of some kind, or so I didn't know. I did, all the first year subjects in law, and I didn't know. I had no direction whatsoever. And it turns out, because I'm a bit of a people pleaser, and my opinions have been manipulated over the years through different relationships and situations. So my close friend, one of my best friends, Christy, she was doing tourism and marketing. So I just thought, well, I'll just do that because she's doing it, and fell into it that way. So it's actually quite sad that sometimes we don't know what we want to do, so we just follow along with other people, and that's part of my story, is trying to get women to have their own voice and find what they actually want to do and find their authentic self.
So who was steering you in this towards business degree? Your parents?
No, not really. It was my expectations about myself. Like I was a perfectionist, so I had this, I've got to achieve. So I was very much, self motivated, and they had put no pressure on me to do anything like that. But I just had this internal pressure to be successful and, be perfect. And that's part of my story too, that I was known as Little Miss Perfect at school, but obviously now I know there's no such thing. That's what they called me at school. Yeah.
I have a similar experience because I grew up in Sydney, and I also in our family, our history, was the first one to go to uni. I went to Sydney Uni. My father always had this idea that I should be in one of the professions. So I wound up doing 3 years in dentistry, of all things. Now, if you ever see me try and fix anything with these hands, I can pass exams, but I can't do anything with my hands. So I thought someone should have spotted that. So after 3 years,
a very interesting direction. Yeah,
exactly. But you sort of get other people going, and you don't know what you want to do really, and you sort of wander along. I thought I'd be a world champion surfboard rider, but that didn't pan out.
That didn't work out. Or a guitarist, like your picture behind you. I see that there's an interest. Yeah, it's funny. I think the previous eras, like the baby boomers and my generation X, there was a lot of pressure and expectations, and a lot about what other people expected of you instead of doing. These days, I think children and young adults are more inclined to follow their own hearts and do what they want to do, which is wonderful progress.
No, I think it is. So at what point? So we're going to start to do with your book, because I got lots of stuff about your book. I got some notes here.
I've got my book here for you to have a little look at. There it is.
Nicely. Where have I been all of my life, in big bold pink?
That's right. How I finally grew up after a life of putting up, giving up, and shutting up. So I think everyone's been lost, and everyone's put up with things that they shouldn't have. Everyone's given up at times, and everyone's silenced in some way. So I think
let's talk about your book. So about you, why did you think that you put up with stuff? Let's call it stuff. For so long.
Well, I know that I put up with stuff. And my wake-up call was when my father passed away in my mid-30s. So I was quite protected in my life and wasn't exposed to any death really until my mid-30s. So I had all my grandparents, which I'm so blessed that I had all my grandparents when I was 35, and then my nana passed away on my mum's side. And then my dad was diagnosed with mesothelioma, which is terminal. There's no cure. So I knew once he was diagnosed that, you know, it's a death sentence basically. So he lived for 18 months. And during that time, both of his parents passed away. So I had this intense time where I had one grandparent, both my other grandparents on my dad's side. Then my dad passed away, and then not long after that, my mum's dad. So I had all of my grandparents and my father pass away in a very short. It was within 3 years, I think. So it was quite dramatic, and that was the wake-up call for me, because I was in unhappy relationships and unhealthy relationships. So toxic. Some of them were toxic relationships, and so it was just this feeling before Dad's death, or before his diagnosis, really, that, you know, I've got all this time ahead of me, and there's, you know, I've got all these generations above, and I've got plenty of time, and it doesn't matter. But then that was time is very limited, and, you know, we're not, you know, guaranteed tomorrow. So it really made me look at my relationships, and I was already unhappy in the relationship I was in. So I made sure I came back from the funeral with a really determined to you know, end the relationship and find myself. And that took me on an inward journey. And yeah, from there, that's when I realized all the things that I'd done, as I said, because of other people's expectations, and not thinking about myself, always being a people pleaser and worrying about, you know, other people's, you know, what other people wanted to do, and never thinking about myself or my needs or wants.
But what was it about you thinking about these your father's death and your grandparents' death in this short period of time? These pivotal moments. What was it about them that made you go, "Hang on, this is bullshit. I've had enough of this nonsense." Yeah. Okay? What actually? Well, I mean, what was the trigger? What was the trigger when bang?
Well, the truth was that I already knew. So I think a lot of women, especially, do have these gut feelings and feel that things aren't right, but we are, you know, tend to be people pleasers and just go along for other people. So even though I don't have my own children, that's part of my story in my book as well. But we all have this, you know, motherly and feminine side, and we all have masculine side as well too, but that's another story as well. But we all have this, you know, a lot of us have this feeling that we need to sort of please other people. And that was, the deaths were for me a wake-up call that, I'm sorry, I'm going to, for the first time in my life, think about myself and stop pandering to other people's. And there was a lot of, and again, I have to explain it in the book because it's chapters and chapters on why I stayed and the psychology behind it all, because it's very complicated. It's you don't stay unless you're getting something out of it. And we also don't leave relationships unless, you know, we're inflicting pain on ourselves. So it's got to get to a tipping point where, you know, we're not abusing ourselves basically as well. So we've got to, the abuse from another person has to be worse than the self-abuse before we actually make a move and move out of those toxic relationships.
I know you touch on that well quite a lot, right? Is that also
I do.
Welcoming intruders?
Yes, no, that's a different. That's basically about when I met Mark. There was absolutely, you know, a wonderful welcoming, and I was accepted by most people, but there was a few people, or not very many, but there was a couple of people who were very resistant and very unwelcoming to me as Mark's partner, which is natural. There's obviously, everyone's got their own perspective and everyone's got their own position, and some people, it doesn't matter who you are, they dislike you before they even meet you because of who you are and what you represent to them. So, and it also awakens pain in other people. So it's just about learning that, you know, it's not about me personally. And that was another thing I had to learn, is because, you know, as a people pleaser and Little Miss Perfect, everyone likes me, and it's like to have that learning experience where actually, no, not everyone likes you, and it's not normal for everyone to like you. So we have to actually learn that we can't be liked by everyone, and that's okay as well. So it's a real genuine acceptance.
What's in your book about with your father's death was suddenly like a pivotal moment to say, well, I don't care if people don't like me.
That's right. And it's not that instant. And of course, that took me a long time actually, because it's not just that happened, and it's like it's a process that we have to go through, and it takes a long time, and it's, no one's perfect, even in, like, you know, we all fall back, and we are, you know, if we're reactionary, we have to just, if we notice it, it's the first step forward. And when we notice what we're doing, and then we get our aha moments, and we're like, why am I triggered by this? So I think everyone has to look at their own reactions and why they're reacting. And I think that helps. It's not really about, if you're frustrated or angry at someone, then it's not usually about that person. It's about the work that you have to do internally. So I worked that out, that, you know, these people they didn't actually have a problem with me. They had issues within themselves that need to be healed. And I accepted that and forgave them. And yeah, hopefully in the future, they'll have some healing as well, which is, yeah, it's what it's all about. We're all, and there's no forward, backwards, someone being ahead. Everyone has their own journey in their own time, and learns the lessons that they are meant to, exactly when they're meant to, I believe. So it's just it's a process we all go through.
Your chapter here about taking responsibility. Was this
taking responsibility?
About,
sorry, I missed it.
That's one of your chapters I read. So I want you to just expand upon that, about what was in your story. I read it, but
so taking responsibility for our own decisions and our own life, instead of blaming other people. And yeah, so it's about stepping into ourself, and like I said before, taking responsibility instead of blaming other people for where we are in our life, believing that we actually have the power to change anything. And instead of just going through the motions, actually taking action to move forward as well. I think there's so much about, and taking responsibility for staying in things too, that, you know, we can stay in relationships that we're not happy with. And if we're blaming the other person, isn't that just, again, it's an ego thing, because why did we stay for so long? There's reasons on both sides. And like I said, it's a bit complicated to talk about here, but it's all very much detail in the book. And I did a lot of research to come to the conclusions that I came to, as well as obviously the life experience.
Well, when you had these moments right after your father's death, and you'd actually done the degree, and you were working in the hospitality industry, what did you branch out and do?
So I wasn't actually then, that was long before. I was in real estate. I worked in a real estate office on the Central Coast, and I was there for about a decade. So I was, again, very comfortable. I had beautiful people that I worked with, and I loved that, but it was very comfortable. So my life was about, you know, staying in the comfort zone, and not, you know, not going through those painful things that would move me forward. So I wanted to do a lot more things, and I had aspirations to write my book. And that's what, as I was working, I'd go home at night and, you know, dabble in my writing. And, you know, I always had this dream to write this book. So it was when I was in the real estate office that's when Dad passed away. So, and all the grandparents passed away. So when I was working there, so then an opportunity came up. It was a few years after that. My husband had an opportunity to take a position on in Sydney, and as a CEO of a publicly listed company, and it would mean this traveling backwards and forwards. So it meant that I had to leave my job, and he didn't want me, you know, to do anything I didn't want to do. You know, we had lots of discussions about that, but he basically said it would give me the opportunity to work on my book full time, which was just a blessing for me. So it worked out well for both of us, and I could support him in his role, and he could support me to write my book. So, because obviously if I don't know where I'm going to be even next week. I know that I've got two things where I've got to be in Newcastle, one I've got to be in Sydney. So we're always, you know, juggling between where we have to be and working out the diary.
Have you thought about writing a book for a long time, or did you just?
I did.
And at what point did you sit down and say, put your fingers on the keyboard?
Okay, so in my early 20s, I wrote probably about 16,000 words. And when I started this basically full-time writing in 2016, I went to a writing retreat with Joanne Fedler. And she's been my mentor and an editor. She did lots of editing as well. And so I've been working with her very closely since 2016, and went to a writing retreat in Fiji with 12 other beautiful women. And we're still in contact now. And was just amazing. And that was this, you know, the story was different. It was about my commuting days. It was sort of half and half. It was about my commuting days, and then a little bit at the bottom of each chapter on my personal story that related. And she said to me one day, "Do you think you could just drop that train story?" And I'm like, "Oh, all right, we'll give it a go." And it was just basically this, you know, cover for me not wanting to be vulnerable. And I absolutely didn't want to reveal all the things that I have revealed. Like, I've revealed my deepest shames and all my mistakes. And as a perfectionist, it really took me a lot of pain. Like, I gave up many times. I was lots of tears. And even when we did one of the exercises in Fiji, and it was this big crescendo moment, and she'd said, write down the thing that you would never write about. And I didn't write it because no one was meant to ever see that, and I wanted to take it to my grave. And so that was all in the book, and it's all I've basically revealed everything, because I think that's what we have to do. We have to be vulnerable ourselves so that we can share our story and help others, because what's the point of life if we're not, you know, sharing what we've learned to help other people? And I think that's the power in the story, is the vulnerability and the authenticity. So that's why it took me probably 5.5 to 6 years to write the book. I spent the last 18 months editing, but and I really wanted to make sure that I didn't disrespect anyone else, because, as you know, as an author, you know, we don't want to, I know it's different with fiction, but we don't want to offend anyone, but we can't write a book without mentioning other people, because it would be very boring if I just said, you know, I woke up, you know, this happened in my family and now I'm happy. It's like, you've got to go through that hero's journey and talk about the moments that were challenging, and the moments that change us, and the moments that move us forward, and to show people basically that, you know, we all make mistakes. We're all, you know, we all have shames, and we all have to move forward through those things and learn from those things. And it doesn't make us a bad person. It just makes us human. And if I can show that through my story, then, like, I'm so happy. Yeah.
Good. So where did you write the book? I mean, over this period, a number of years. You mentioned earlier you were on the boat on the harbour.
That's right.
So did you?
So I had to get
Yeah.
I know that I would like to hear what you do too, Mike, because I know you've probably got your office there and you sit there and do the certain times, because most authors do that. But I had to get very flexible. So I have a backpack, and I have my pencil case and my computer and my notebook, and basically that is my office. So I had to be flexible and adapt to being on the boat, being in the dining room table at my Newcastle home. Sometimes I'd be in a hotel room or a cafe, but mainly I'd say, you know, 40 or 50% on the boat, and 40 or 50% at the dining room table, and a little bit in hotels and cafes and things, like random places like that. So yeah.
Did you find that you could write with the ferries going up and down and that?
I had to get used to that. I had to get used to that. It wasn't that bad. Like, it was only a slight rock. It was quite like it was about 5 meters wide. So it had quite a wide berth. So it was quite stable. So it's just that, you know, that's just that feeling.
But you could actually see the ferries going past and little boats.
I had an office on the boat.
And that didn't distract you at all?
No, it wasn't distracting at all.
It was very focused.
Relaxing.
Far more than I am.
It was very relaxing. Yeah. There was more procrastination if I, you know, as you know, when we have writer's block, and just, you know, I'd go and make a cup of tea or go and, you know, have something to eat. So it was more just, that was more of a distraction than any boats or anything like that going past. Even the weather, it was always just beautiful. The weather was, you know, even when it was raining, it was just lovely. And everyone used to say, does it get really cold in winter? But it's actually warmer, because you're in the water, which is normally warmer than the air temperature. So, and obviously we had air conditioning and all the luxuries as well. But yeah, no, it was quite a fun experience. And yeah, I've got some beautiful memories. And absolutely, when I think about the writing of this book, a lot of it is definitely centered in the boat, in that office, which was magical.
Wow, so you're a very focused person, but that must come from your background, I guess, in your early days, trying to be perfect, that you could actually focus like that. I mean, I can't do that.
True. Not many people can. Maybe that's why it took so long, because I was always distracted by moving.
Yeah, I mean, we live on the beach here, and I get pelicans flying over, and I look across at Seal Island, I can see the seals, well, sea lions, I can see them arriving, and so I think, and people drive past in the 1960s, 1970 Mustangs, and I got a little room out the back.
Distracted.
I close everything.
How funny. Seeing the birds in the beach would be beautiful. That's a lovely position.
Well, then, yeah, for a break, I get up and walk on the beach. But yeah.
Lovely.
So you publish your book here locally. I mean, I'm in Perth. We got the same publisher, Karen McDermott. How did you meet Karen?
So through Joanne, and Karen's been absolutely wonderful. And just the moment we met, we had an online relationship for quite a few years. She had a magazine a few years ago called Enrich, and I did an article in that. And we've just been, in each other's space online for several years. But when I basically tried to finish the book with it before I thought about the publishing side, so that I could focus on that instead of getting distracted by, all the what ifs of publishing. And we had a Zoom meeting, and I didn't even know if I'd be chosen. And she was so welcoming, and I felt very aligned, and it was just an easy transition. And I felt really blessed that to be working with Karen, because she has just been amazing and opened up other doors for me as well. And yeah, I just love her to death, and just think she's just, as is Joanne. I just think without, as you know, it takes so many people to help, get a book into the world. So I'm so grateful to both of those women and so many others. My original acknowledgements page was 15 pages in my book, and I had to cut that down. So I'm very, very grateful for all, everyone that touched the manuscript and helped it move forward.
Have you been over here to Perth at all?
No, I haven't, but I plan to come over and visit soon. So yeah, I may be able to meet you then, Mike. I'll definitely let you know when I'm coming over.
Karen's offices are about 1K that way in central Rockingham, and her house is also on the beach. It's about another K. So we're about 50 K south of Perth.
Sounds beautiful. I'll definitely have to book something in. My husband's sometimes over there too, so I could tack on with one of his holidays, not his holidays, but with one of his trips. Yeah, I could have a holiday while he's having a work trip.
He's a sailor, so although maybe not, because he builds tanks, doesn't he?
He does, yes. They're very busy at the moment, and he's been in Darwin doing a big project up there.
There's huge tank farms here at Kwinana, which is like 15 minutes away.
Yes, he's probably been there many, many times. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's next? What are you doing at the moment? What are you doing at the moment, and what's next? Let's start with what are you doing
at the moment. Okay, so at the moment, there's lots going on. I've got 3 more books that will be published by the end of the year that I'm a part of. So there's some anthologies that I'm doing, say, a chapter in, 2 to 2,500 words. So that's keeping me very busy. I've done one of them, completed that one, and it's just in the process of editing. Another one that I've been working on the last few days, I've had a little bit of a block with that one, but I think I cleared that today, which is great. So, even just one chapter, it can take, 3 or 4 weeks minimum to even, to start the process, sometimes even longer. And another one I think is due in May. So they're the 3 books that I'm working on. I have so many ideas, but again, I'll talk about that in a minute, because that's the next step.
To anthologies.
Yes, so that's the 3 that I'm actually working on, as I said, at the moment. I'm also trying to give this book the time. It's taken me so long. I don't want to just go, right, done it and move on, because I want to give it the time to get it out there in the world, because I do believe that the message is very important, and I want as many people to read. I've had so many people resonate and pass it on to other people because they feel that it will be helpful for a friend or a daughter or a parent, and that really is heartwarming for me to feel that it's landing exactly where I wanted it to land, and people are gaining things from. And some of the messages I've been receiving are really touching, and I'm so blessed to.
Some sort of guidance as to what to possibly have is in a book. Like,
I'm sorry, I missed that, Mike.
I'm saying, with what other people have come back to you with the feedback you've got, has that given you thought as to what the next book should be? Like, where have I been all my life?
Absolutely.
You know?
That's right. Well, the next one may be called Where Do I Go From Here? So then, and that sort of will deal with the next stage of my life. So, you know, the middle age kind of experiences and changes and different things, because obviously at different stages of our life, we go through different things. So I've already got ideas for several chapters for that one. And at my book launch, I had an old fashioned typewriter, and I had, you know, Where Do I Go From Here? Lisa Benson popping out of the typewriter as a little teaser. So, but I also have other ideas for fiction books as well. My husband actually came up with a great idea. We were on the boat one night having a few drinks, and he started blurting out this plot, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so he wrote it down in his iPad, and we've got notes from it. So we'll have to explore that one. I just haven't had time. I'm trying to get my book into bookshops, and I've got it into a few gift shops, and I'm actually going to, a part of the story from the book is some serendipitous moments that I've had at this particular health retreat, and I met my husband there as well as Joanne. So it's been a significant place for me, and it's now called Alicia, and I'm going there next week to deliver books for their gift shop, and I'll possibly be speaking at
this health retreat?
It's in the Hunter Valley, so in Newcastle, Hunter Valley, yeah, in the wine region in the Hunter. So there's all little things like that I'm working on, and there's a few podcasts and interviews lined up. So it's quite busy, you know, just doing this work, trying to promote the book. As you know, it's very time consuming, but yeah, then once everything settles down and these books are done, I'll look at some other projects. But yeah, I feel things are flowing, and I really, the answer to your original question of what's next is I really don't know what's next, but I know that I'm heading in the right direction. I know I've been called to do this. I know that there's messages that I'm here to give a voice to people that maybe don't feel strong enough at this point to have a voice. So I feel that I'm definitely doing what I'm meant to be doing, and it's leading me somewhere. And let me have a chat with you in 6 or 12 months time and see where that ends up.
Do you find from what's in your book, is it with all the different chapters and the things that you touch on, is it when people give you feedback and you look at it and think, maybe I could have and should have taken that a bit further?
As in my book or in their life?
Well, a bit of both. You know, that they came back to you and said that there's something in here that they resonated with.
Absolutely.
But when they start talking, you realise that they're sort of talking another level, either another level forward or another depth to it, where you thought, maybe I should expand upon that. Do you find that?
Yeah, there's things. I'm not really finding that, to be honest. I'm finding a lot of more people are having aha moments for themselves, and like there's different markets that, like, I haven't had my own children, so I give an option to young women of an unconventional path. So I'm showing women that you don't have to be married in your 20s, have children in your 20s or 30s, and have this, you tick the boxes. So there's a lot of people that are comforted by that. There's also, I talk about intergenerational trauma, and a lot of people hadn't heard of it or are really going to, look at that in their own families because they realize things that they didn't even know existed, basically. And there's a lot of things, in relationships where we don't know sometimes unless someone points it out to us. I've had some close friends that, one in particular, that she didn't realize what she was putting up in her relationship until I explained through my story what I had put up with and saw the similarities, because sometimes we are, and a lot of this coercive control, and we don't actually know what's happening because it is insidious. So I have one woman tell me that I gave her life back, and it just things like this that are just so profound. And some women are saying, I will raise my children differently because of some of the things I've said. Like, I'm absolutely overwhelmed with the beautiful comments, and one lady today told me that it felt like I was sitting in an armchair and just having a chat with her. That's the conversational voice of the book is that it just feels like, and that's what I wanted it to be. I didn't want it to be this, literary piece where people didn't understand the words. I wanted it to be a conversation.
Your book is your voice. As
yes, that's exactly right.
Spoken to you, it is your voice. It is like we're sitting in a pub having a drink, and which I guess
that's
we are.
Exactly right. We are, but mine's not a good one. It's a tea. Next time.
But you do a lot of research for your books, don't you?
I certainly did do a lot of research, and it was a lot of interesting. Like I listened to, it would have been hundreds and hundreds of podcasts, but I read a lot of books as well, a lot of self-help books, a lot of memoirs. And I am so grateful for all the books that I read. And I did a post about that a few weeks ago, because it really is something that the authors of those books won't know how much they've impacted me and how much I've got out of it. But it's just having conversations. And I had one of my friends that we used to have conversations almost daily. And so we'd, figure out the problems of the world. And so it's about learning through. And that's a lot of the reason also that it took me so long, is because a lot of the things that I was trying to say at the beginning of my writing journey, I hadn't even been through myself. So I had to go through the process. The writing process was parallel to my life process. So it was very much this whole life experience that I was basically, journalizing, if that's a word, but I was putting it down in words as it was actually happening. And then I'd massage it and, have an epiphany in the shower or when I'm having a walk. So it was really quite cathartic for me but the books just reading other people's opinions, and so many different opinions, and actually finding my own opinion instead of just listening to someone's opinion and accepting that as the right thing, and actually thinking what I really want myself, which is, I think, very important these days as well.
Where I was leading the witness here is that with your researching, the amount of research that you done, a topic you touched on a couple of minutes ago was this business of intergenerational trauma.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Because there is, over the last year or so, it's becoming more and more pronounced and getting mentioned in a lot of articles and speaking on radio and that. And almost to saying that it creeps into the DNA.
Absolutely. And I mentioned a book called It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallen in the book. And there's other ones as well. Oprah's written one with a doctor, which I can't remember his name. What Happened to You. And there's another one, The Body Keeps Score. There's another James Hollis, I think. There's another one from him. So I've read several books on that topic, but it's the interesting thing that I think we don't understand is that if you think of your own grandmother on your mum's side, so when your grandmother is pregnant with your mother at around, say, 5 months, your eggs are already in that body. So your grandmother has a fetus, or actually a baby by then, but a baby, and then the eggs of the grandchild. So the environment, it's about epigenetics and how the environment can affect. And so it's like the Holocaust survivors and who are, literally affected and on, on alert for things that they've never experienced firsthand, but they were in that environment in the body of their grandparent when those things were happening. And it's about, epigenetics is all about how we can be shaped and affected by our environment. And when you really do look into the research, it is fascinating, and it does make sense. So again, there's a whole chapter. There's probably it's touched on a few times, but there's a whole chapter on that, and that is one of the chapters that a few people have actually said this has been really enlightening for their family situation, which is it makes me happy to hear.
I still think that'd be a great book topic for you, because your penchant for research and coming with that, because I know that my wife's a GP, and and we've spoken about this when I've heard it on the radio or read about that, and the average GP or the average specialist has got so many other things to deal with. If there's a family dispute, or there's someone's been stabbed, or there's been domestic violence, they deal with that point in time.
That's right.
Fix the immediate problem, or call the police, or somebody goes to jail, or there's a restraining order or whatever. So we fix the thing, but there's there's actually nothing to say like, oh, your grandmother was slapped around, or was stabbed or something. Therefore, we know what triggers you. Okay,
That's
because
right.
these people who have this intergenerational trauma, they pop out of the womb with all sorts of trauma, with all sorts of triggers already set up, and they don't know about it. I thought,
That's
wow.
right. That's exactly right. And a lot of people they know they have issues, or they might have issues that they think, why am I like this? Like, why? And I know I give some examples of me, and without giving too much away, I didn't have my own children for circumstances which I do explain in the book. And every woman has a personal story about whether they choose to have children or not. But when I explored through my auntie and on my dad's side, my auntie, my dad's sister, and my mum's side, I realized that there was, I can't even remember, that was something like 12, it might have been 10 or 12 children that died. So the parents had this trauma of, having lost their children. So I even before, when I was in my 20s, I had this feeling that, I was very resistant to childbirth because I thought I'm going to have a problem with childbirth, or and it was so, unrealistic and, just, I don't know, it's just silly, kind of a silly thought that I was having. But then when I explored that in my family, lots of the generations above had lost their children. So that's why maybe my fear was about losing a child, because my fear was in the bloodline about that. I don't know. And again, it can be coincidence, but I talk about a few different incidences where, it related to me. And sometimes just knowing that it's not you, that it's come through, and it's not a blame thing either. You don't go, oh, well, it's my parents' fault, because that doesn't help either. And I think when we, cut our parents off or don't be understanding towards them, it's actually creating the intergenerational trauma to continue. Whereas we can stop the patterns of the intergenerational trauma by dealing with it and healing it in ourselves, so it doesn't go on to the future generations. So it's absolutely fascinating when you look into it. And if there is holocausts or adoptions or certain events, and certain events definitely.
Here's another thing to add into this novel, which you are going to write. Okay.
I'll write notes. Yes.
Okay. Is that when I went to Sydney University, I did computer science and I had to do an elective. So I wound up doing 2 years of psychology. It was a random topic. I thought, I thought it would help me explain girls, but it didn't really. That's why I did it. Guilty. Anyway, moving on. So we're in this thing. We had to do stats, okay? Anyway, we do this thing, and we do these things, and we do these tests and whatever, and then there's control group, and then they'd say, "Oh no, that's just the placebo effect." And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "No, well, the body just did it, but we ignore that. It's just the placebo effect." I said, "Sorry, excuse me. Am I the only one in the class who's missing something?" Okay, because these people shouldn't have changed. Okay? They took the sugar-coated pill. They shouldn't have changed. Okay, but they did. So I've wondered. Maybe this is another topic for the book you're going to write. Is there a connection somewhere between this placebo effect where we can fix ourselves? Because there's been more studies about that as well. And is there somehow linked to intergenerational trauma? How that gets, because that's getting carried through in your DNA, but your DNA has got a capacity to fix itself without you even knowing. It's
changeable.
It's all changeable.
That's
so
right.
I was wondering, and we chat about here, could these be linked? Because when you go on, you hear people talk about one or the other. Shouldn't it be like, it's like to me, like you can't talk about economics without talking about history. Okay.
True.
We always thought there were two different topics. Like what? That be possible. So
I think it's so interesting. Exactly, you've brought up something, and I will make a note for that for my next book. But there's a man called Joe Dispenza who talks about neuroplasticity, and he is also connected with Bruce Lipton, who's the epigenetics person. And so it is all about that. The environment is the epigenetics part, and the neuroplasticity, which is we have the power to he calls it supernatural. So we have the power to change. You know, we've got to have our mind and our heart and our soul all aligned, and we can make those changes. It's like when, you know, we might have cancer or heart disease in our family, but it doesn't mean it has to be brought to the surface. It's the same thing. It's our environment that has the power, and it's our thoughts and our beliefs. But if we want to, I think there's a lot of people that get stuck, and it's sad. There's no judgment here, that they get stuck in a victim mentality. They don't realize that their, you know, parent or grandparent was in this same victim mentality. So they're brought up with that, you know, that they can change. Everyone can change, and we can all change and become whoever we want to be. And so that is definitely something to explore deeper. And
it must do. Yeah, so instead of just blaming our parents, we can blame our grandparents.
That's exactly right. Or the great grandparents. it's safer to do that. Yes.
Well, on that note, thank you for joining me in the studio. Lovely to hear about.
My pleasure, Mike.
All right.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time.
Okay, I'm going to end the broadcast. I'm going to end the broadcast, but don't toddle off. All right.
Okay, I'll wait here. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.